Namaste and welcome to another episode of Itihasdhir with me, Aditi Joshi, and my co-host Aditya Saraf. At Itihasdhir, we delve into the stories, traditions, and historical insights that continue to shape the world today and honor the past while guiding the future. And today we are honored to have with us Padma Shri awardee, a man who has written 35 books across genres and launched Assam's Braveheart, Lachit Borphukan in 2024, Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta, and we will be discussing his book, The Ahoms, a Reimagined History today. Um, here's the book. The book is available on Kindle as well as on Amazon. And in this episode, we will be probing into the myths, manuscripts in modern politics that swirl around the 6 centuries of the Ahom rule. And of course, Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta will be guiding us, and his narrative fuses the archival Buranjis, oral lore, and creative storytelling. So, welcome to Itihasdhir, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So, sir, I want to start off by asking you that you call this book a reimagined history. So, how did your 5 decade journey as a journalist and writer shape the decision to blend fact with the dramatized scenes in the book? And which investigative techniques have proven indispensable while sifting the ahomboranjis, which sometimes can be slightly contradictory?
Uh, I have been writing for over 6 decades now. My journey as a writer, it began in the 1960s. Both of you perhaps were not born at the time. So, no, I have written almost everything that is possible for a writer to do. Fiction, non-fiction, uh, articles, satire, everything. And so the Ahoms came at a later stage of my writing career. And prior to this, I had utilized one episode of this dynasty, the story of the Sudangfa, the uh, the Ahom king, who prior to ascending the throne had been sent off from the Ahom kingdom by the prime minister and the other ministers to save his mother from being executed by the elder queen. So I had used that, small bit of legend regarding Sudangfa and wrote a book called The Boy Who Became King. That was published by a New Delhi-based publisher, Rupa Publications. Now, I found that this kind of a technique in which you blend historical realities with an imaginative depiction of the same realities, that worked very well because that book was extremely popular. Now, what I have done here is I have taken the actual history of this magnificent dynasty and I have tried to imaginatively retell the story, not in the bland fashion of a historian, but of that of a creative writer. Now, at least I'll say around 60% of the material that you read in this book, it does not, it is, has nothing to do with reality. The rest 40% is based upon historical episodes. So right from the beginning, what I have done is I have used accurate historical episodes and then use my imagination to repaint them in a different kind of way. Now that is important because otherwise there are books on history, but they don't have many readers. That is because people are not totally absorbed with the dry factual history. They will be more attracted towards a history, a kind of history which is imaginatively told.
Yes.
So, and that this kind of a approach has proved to be quite fruitful because this book, The Ahoms, it has got extremely good sale and readership. So it is a imagine, the facts are accurate historical facts.
Hmm.
But it's the background is all imagined, but not in a vacuum, mind you, because you find that there are some other books on history, historical books, which tells you something about the background in which a certain episode is set. For instance, we may be talking about the history of the Sukafa's time. Well, how did people, light a fire? I mean, what kind of house did they build? What was the composition of any village? So those are things that I have imagined, but based upon some other source material which has nothing to do with the physical, political history part of it. So I have created a fictional village called Kolabari. And I tried to imagine what the village in the this was set in the I think the 15th century. What a
Hmm.
village in the this region could be like in that period. Again, the journey of Sukafa from Mungmao to the Brahmaputra Valley, that is pure imagination. What kind of a journey he made. Of course, nowadays there are some historians who have tried to depict that kind of journey with historical references. But then ultimately, I didn't have any access to that material, so I used my imagination. How he came from a principality in Yunnan province of China and traveled for 12, 14 years and ultimately landed up in the Brahmaputra Valley. And even here, he roamed around. He came in 12, 1298, I think.
Hmm.
And, oh, sorry, 1228. He came to enter the Brahmaputra Valley in 1228, but he ultimately set up his kingdom in 1253. So from 1228 to 1253, he roamed around looking for a place where he could set up his kingdom.
So, I have another question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Um, your earlier works, which were so this is a historical fiction work. Your earlier non-fiction works like the Brahmaputra or Chagaram, they balance ecology and culture. So, did those lenses influence how you frame the home statecraft and the environment?
Those books, I have written around 11 non-fiction books,
Ji.
all with the Northeast or Assam as the leitmotif. Now, this book is different from those books. For instance, Unicornis, that gives the
Hmm.
history of the magnificent beast we know as the one-horned
Hmm.
rhinoceros, which is a denizen of the famous Kaziranga Wildlife Sanctuary. Or I have written on tea, or lots of other subjects dealing with this region. An incident called Pothorghat, that is one episode that should be known to all over all the rest of India, but unfortunately it does not even merit a footnote in the history of our independence. So this book is different, is that it is an imaginative retelling of history. I followed this up with another similar book. It's called Saint Savior Soul Society. That is the life of the great Vaishnav saint who is one of the major architects of Assamese society. So both these books, they are based on history, but then it is history imaginatively told. The other books, for instance, I have written on the final frontier, is the history of the telecommunication of the railway system in the Northeast. Very fascinating and very romantic kind of history. Then I have written on oil exploration in this region. It's called the Pipeline Saga. So those books, they are pure, depiction of facts. They're repetition of actual happenings. But these two books, the Ahoms and Saint Savior Soul Society, they belong to another category where you use historical episodes and you imaginatively rework those episodes into something that is more exciting than purely drab history.
So you talk about how around 40% of your book on the Ahoms is based on history as well. So for our readers, because we are a channel who have a lot of history readers per se as well, uh, what are the primary sources that you have referred to? One, of course, are the Buranjis, but could you go into detail what the Buranjis are exactly? That is the first part of my question.
The Burunjis, they are, record of the doings, the events of the time from 1228 onwards, after Sukafa entered the Brahmaputra Valley. The progenitor of the Ahom dynasty, Sukafa, Chaulung Sukafa, he entered the Brahmaputra Valley. So before that, we are more dependent on oral traditions and other sources. In fact, now some people are doing some research on where did Sukafa come from? What was the nature of his journey? But those things you will not find in the Buronjis, because Buronjis start from 1228 after Sukafa entered the Brahmaputra Valley. And secondly, the Buronjis are simply matter of fact logging of certain episodes. They don't broach into details. They don't go into details. For instance, again, I come back to Sudangfa's story. The Sudangfa stories has only two paragraphs in one of the most important Buronjis, the Tungkhungia Buronji. So it is simply a bland statement of facts. Now, next important aspect is that the Buronjis, they are monarch-centric. they deal only with the doings of the king, but they have nothing, no reference at all to what the common people used to live, what their lifestyle, their thing. It doesn't give us any kind of detail about the period itself. Only that this king reigned from this time and from this year to this year, and he conquered this. It's a very, if you have read, you must have, because I think that you have done your homework regarding this dynasty. I think you know that the Burunjis are, what they call very matter-of-fact depiction of historical episodes. So you have to supplement the Burunjis with other uh, sources of information. For instance, uh, let me try to give you an example. Now, you know, we have this uh, Horaigat battle.
Yes.
That is the final battle in which the Ahoms, who represent the Assamese people, they the vanquished the Mughal army. Now, that there are sufficient material for, following that story. But then, in some cases, you will discover, because it is monarch-centric, we have no historical documentation on a figure like Lasit Borphukan. The Lasit Borphukan is an icon in Assam, but you used, when you gave me the initial note, you spoke about my saying what you call country, and my uncle is not greater than my country. That is simply a folklore prevalent in Assamese folklore. There is no documentation of that kind of a statement in actual Ahom Buranji. But it is very much prevalent in the folklore of this region. So there are, certain other sources apart from the Burunjis which you have to depend on. And you also used a very important reference. You spoke about this, these ballads and other, Thai-related songs. Now, unfortunately, I could not take recourse to them because this is in Thai language. They have not been translated into either Assamese or English.
Right.
So, but even then, you hear the lyrics and you understand some of the references in those things. Also, there are books, as I said, which gives you some idea about the background of that period. Those books are as important as the Burunjis because they tell you more about the lifestyle of the people and about the common man. And for instance, the Ahoms had a very unique kind of method of cremation. They used to build pyramid-like structures called maidams. Now, how is a maidam built? What are the ingredients of building a maidam? What are the materials that are used? You will not find it in the Burunjis, but other scholars have done research on that aspect. For instance, there is one book called the Itihasdhir Sarikha Bosor, that is in Assamese. Now that has a different, that takes a different angle to the study of the period, the Ahom history. That is, other aspects such as building of a moidam.
Right. So again, I mean, you touched upon the Battle of Saraighat. Now, something like that is so important to Indian history. It is so central to our understanding of India as a whole. And yet, we see that that finds no mention even in the footnotes of Indian history books, at least those that we have studied from. CBSC, NCERT, these books do not have any references to an empire like the Ahoms, which was undoubtedly a great empire. So, what curricular overhaul would you advocate, and how can popular history like you've written about the Ahoms catalyze it?
That's the fate of places which lie on the periphery of the national consciousness. I think you all know very well that the our national consciousness is mostly North Indian centric. So places in the periphery, they do not matter that much to our mainstream, either historians or others. Things are changing now. So this for the first time you find in NCRT,
Hmm.
a chapter is being devoted, a section is being devoted to the Ahom dynasty. Let me tell you, the Northeast has a plethora of people who sacrifice everything for the freedom movement. The contribution of this region to the freedom movement is as great, if not greater, than any other part of India. But we do not find the mention of our freedom fighters, our freedom movements. Those things we do not find reflected in mainstream writing. I was very surprised to note that in the Birla House, where the place where Mahatma Gandhi was shot dead,
Hmm.
you find that they have an entire wall depicting various episodes of India's freedom movement. But neither Assam nor the Northeast finds even a mention among those writings. So that is a part of this thing. But things, as I said, are changing. And enlightened people like you are trying to at least bring a peripheral region into the mainstream national consciousness. So thank you so much for organizing this kind of a thing.
Thank you so
Uh,
much, sir. We are all trying to do our small part. I think no one has done more for this than you have. I mean, the kind of the plethora of work that you've done, and beyond work, um, the shifting of the imagination from, as you said, a North Indian centric perspective to somewhere that focuses on the northeastern part of India. It is a very important thing that you've done.
No, thank you.
Um, so, sir, I want to talk with regards to the Thai warriors who came in 1228 under Sukhapa, across the Patkai range and unknowingly altered the destiny of the Brahmaputra Valley. So, keeping that in mind, you've also mentioned that the dynasty helped weld the scattered tribes into one whole Assamese identity. So, there are several chronicles which date Sukhapa's entry between 1228 to 1235. Which sources guided your choice for 1228? And how do you reconcile the gaps between the Thai oral songs and the Assamese Buranjis?
Uh, you know, firstly, you have touched upon a most important aspect, and that was mentioned in the write-up you gave me also, that, you know, the Ahoms were instrumental in, unifying the disparate entities in the Brahmaputra Valley into one whole, that is the national identity of the Assamese people were first, what you call, formulated by the Ahoms. Now, for that, you have to have some idea about the ethnological history of this region. You see, unlike rest of India, the dominant element in the migration pattern since 2000 years ago to the Brahmaputra Valley was Mongoloid. It was a Mongoloid race which migrated to this valley. Sukafa came much later. Even before him, there were periodic, what you call, intrusion of migrants from mainly Western China. And they were Mongoloids, and they reached the Brahmaputra Valley and the hills nearby, and they start peopling them in small, small communities. For instance, when Sukafa came, there were already a number of small communities in the valley itself as well as the hills. For instance, we had the Chutia tribe, we have the Kosari tribe, we had the Boro tribes, we had the Bhuyas. Now, Bhuyas were only a small component of the overall ethnologic profile that was in that uh, in the valley and the hills when Sukafa arrived. So Sukafa did not arrive as a conqueror. He came as a migrant looking for a place where he and his band of followers could set up a kingdom. And ultimately, after decades of wandering in the Brahmaputra Valley, they finally settled on a place called Soraido in Upper Assam in order to, and they set up the first kingdom, the first Ahom kingdom with the capital at Soraido.
So, sir, what social, economic, or even environmental reasons led Sukhafa and his people to migrate? And how did their ties to, their political and cultural scenarios back home shape the early years in Assam?
No, I mean, actually, Sukafa, if you read the Ahoms, you'll discover that initially, although in an imaginative way, I have tried to give the background which made Sukafa leave Mungmao and come to the Brahmaputra Valley. You see, Sukafa's father had been defeated in a battle, and he took shelter in the kingdom of another Thai ruler. Now, that Thai ruler, I won't bore you with the names, they're very hard to pronounce. So those rulers, that ruler, he, you know, he loved Sukafa, and uh, it seemed almost preordained that Sukafa would grow up and become the king of that principality. But unfortunately, that king, at the late stage of his life, he gave birth to a son. So Sukafa suddenly found himself that he was no longer eligible to become the king of that principality. That's called Mungmao. So what he did, he, on the advice of his grandmother, he gathered around 9,000 of a band of around 9,000, and they left this thing because the grandmother said that two tigers cannot live in the same forest.
mm,
Meaning that since the prince had been born and he would one day grow up to the king, there's no place for you in this kingdom. And that not it's not economic reason, but political reason, which induced Sukafa to leave his ancestral place and migrate to another thing with around 900 of his followers. Oh,
so
9,000,
sir,
sorry, not 900.
uh, yes. So, sir, as you said, I mean, he had a whole tapestry of like, in terms of the society, right? He had a lot of ethnic groups, he had a lot of tribal groups, and he had to start forging alliances in order to, consolidate his rule, even though the Ahoms at that time, as you said, it were 9,000 people. So they would have been a minority. So how did that happen? How did he start, synthesizing and, adopting a syncretic view of the culture and bringing all of these different elements of society together?
Uh, I don't think it was a positive endeavor. I think it was something that happened automatically in due course of time because Sukafa was content, and not only Sukafa but also his descendants for almost
Mm,
2.5 centuries. They were content in surviving, in existing within a very small area in Upper Assam with the
mm,
capital of Saraido. They didn't venture out. They didn't go on a conquering spree.
mm,
And because the Thais, they were extremely tolerant. They had their own religion, they had their own language, they had their own historical Burunjis, but they did not try to impose that on the others. So this kind of tolerance, it somehow, you know, attracted people from other parts of Assam, apart from the Ahom kingdom, into embracing in marriage and other through interaction, social interaction, the Ahoms as almost indigenous. It was a long process, as I said, around 2.5 centuries, in which Sukafa and his successors, they stayed in that small area. It was only when Suhungmung, one of the great Ahom kings, and only Suhungmung started venturing out of the small domain that the expansion of the Ahom dynasties commenced. And they firstly conquered the Chutia tribes, which was in Upper Assam, then the Kosaris, and finally they came into conflict with the uh, one tribe, mainly the Kush tribe.
mm,
The Kush tribe. What I'm trying to say is that ultimately, during the time of Suhungmung, the empire expanded to cover much of the Brahmaputra valley. And that's the first time that the Ahoms expanded through conquest. But prior to that, because most of the followers who Sukafa had brought, they were males. So
mm,
they married local women of other tribes, the Borahis, the Morans, and the other tribes, even some Chutias, and they ultimately there's some kind of assimilation. And most important is that they gave up their own religion and language. Now, by the time Sukafa had entered Assam, Hinduism had already
Hmm.
percolated from mainland India into the northeast. So there we had this, and the Hindu proselytizers, they were careful to start at the top. So you find the kings and the monarchs during that period prior to the Ahoms, they adopted Hinduism, although
Right.
the subjects were not Hindus. So in the Assam, Hinduism percolated from the top to the base. But by the time Sukapa had come, it was the dominant religion in the region. And we have this famous temple called Kamaikha Temple that was supposed to be the epicenter of this religion. Now, what Sukafa very wisely did was he gave up his own religion as a language. And by that time, a pidgin kind of a mixed, language had evolved also, which we now call Ahomia or Assamese. He accepted the Hindu religion as well as the uh, the Assamese language and gave up the Thai customs and languages in order to make him and his people more acceptable to the people who are already there in the valley.
So, another important question that comes to mind is, of course, when we are talking about Ahoms, and then we listen to the name of the state currently, which is Assam, uh, it comes to mind, is there any connection between the two words?
Oh, yes. I mean, ultimately, Assam evolved from Ahom. And the Ahom itself has a very interesting antecedent, which again you have mentioned. It has nothing to do with reverse or anything. When the Ahoms first entered, and when Sukafa first came, he had with him extremely, able-bodied, strong group of men. And they, on the way to the Brahmaputra Valley, they conquered fierce Naga tribes. And, they had proven by making this arduous journey to the people already within the Brahmaputra Valley that they were Ahoma. Ahoma meaning peerless. They had no peers.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, the Shan people, they cannot pronounce the word Ho.
Hmm. Uh,
I doubt if any of you can also pronounce that word Ho. So they used to pronounce it as Ho.
hmm.
So Ahoma became Ahoma in the Brahmaputra Valley, and ultimately it metamorphosed to Ahoms. So the term Assam actually came from the Ahom people. Before that, I think you again, because you were aficionado of history, Assam was called Pragjotishpur, one small part, and later Kamarup, because Kama was supposed to be having his, but those are all, Brahminical thing. Otherwise, the name, permanent name Assam, it came from the Ahoms.
Uh, so, sir, I wanted to ask you so the context of this goes to the Battle of Saraighat. There's an immortal quote which is, "My uncle is not greater than my country." And in regards to this, I want to like take this forward and ask that the Ahoms repelled 17 Mughal incursions. And beyond terrain familiarity, what other intangible devices did they sustain that made them this resilient? And do you also view Ahoms as a crucial factor behind the Mughal decline when combined with the hardships that the Marathas were already giving them?
There's an exaggeration. The
Okay,
Ahoms did not repulse the Mughals 17 times.
okay,
In fact, prior, because I told you that the Ahoms did not leave their listing even 2.5 centuries after the first kingdom was set up. But by that time, this Islamic expansion had already started, and there were other Islamic invaders who had come and attacked this region. They were not the Ahoms who repulsed them. They were first, for quite a few years, few decades, the coast people, they they stood as buffer between the Ahoms and uh, the Mughals, or the and only when the coast kingdom broke up did the Ahoms come into face-to-face confrontation with the Mughals. So assault by Islamic invaders were not confined to Mughals. Mughals was a later phase. That Islamic invaders had come even before, but they were repulsed by some other agencies. So I think the Ahoms, I think they must have repulsed around maximum seven Mughal attacks. The most
okay.
decisive was obviously the Horagat battle.
Mm, okay. And many also see Lachit Borphukan as Assam Shivaji, and others say that is like, communal appropriation. So, how do you negotiate the hero making without flattering, facts for what they are?
Uh, you must be aware that that's of course a different story altogether. I have written a book called Assam's Braveheart, Lasit Borphukan. Now, that was at the request of our main, publication thing, organization called Publication Board Assam. Now, that book, unfortunately, had been subjected to lots of, you know, media blitz, and ultimately it was made something that was, I don't think that was my original intention. I had written that book only in answer to, only in response to the Assam Publication Board request. Now, it is my fervent belief that you have to take the entire dynasty as whole rather than single out some one or two figures and convert them or impart to them an iconic stature. So yes, Lasit was extremely important historically because he was the man of the moment in repulsing the huge army of Mansingh, which was which had come to attack uh, the Ahom kingdom. But there were others also. You must take the entire dynasty in totality. For example, but certain elements they're trying to single out Lasit for special treatment. I'll tell you that there are equally important heroes in the history of the Ahom dynasty. Obviously, Sukafa is one. Then we have Suhungmung. Then we also have Pratap Singha, who was, he initiated great social reforms, and the most important of them, Rudrasingha. I think during the time of Rudrasingha, the Ahom dynasty flowered, it blossomed into one of a very spectacular kind of a entity. So Lasit is only one component of the holistic, appraisal of the Ahom dynasty. But then, obviously, everybody needs an icon on which to focus. Well, I think one of the compatriots of Lasit Borfukan, I don't wonder if you know his name. His name is Oton Buragohai. Now, Oton Buragohai had equal importance in the Battle of Saraighat and as Lasit Borfukan.
So, I will also take up the religious aspect of the dynasty. We see that, there are a lot of internal politics, as you said. Of course, one was the role of Hindu priests who came in looking to, sort of make the rulers Hindus. We see a very beautiful, tale of all of these priests, tackling problems together, sometimes even as warring factions, so to say, in your tale. Uh, how did the dual role of the traditional Ahom priest, the Deodhai, I'm sorry if I am not pronouncing that correctly, the Deodhai, the Mohan, and the Bailung, and on the other hand, the Brahmin advisors, how did that shape the politics at the royal court?
Yeah, again, you have focused on a very vital point. Uh, if you know something about the history of Ahoms, you'll discover that it was during the reign of Sudangfa that the accidental, entry of Brahminical influence began. Because Sudangfa, as I told you, was was brought up by a Brahmin family in the that is, north bank of the Brahmaputra. I will not repeat this extremely romantic and fascinating story, but for quite a few years, there was no king in the capital, Sarajevo. There was no monarch, and because Sudangfa's father, Tiayakamti, he was killed in battle with the Chutias. And for almost 6 years, the throne at Sarajevo was vacant. We call them Patra Mantris, or the ministers, the three ministers, Buragai, Borguhai, and Borpatra Guhai. They started searching the entire thing for the younger queen's son. And unless tell you the entire story, you will not be able to understand the basic point. But anyway, what happened was they ultimately discovered that in a village in North Bank, in a Brahmin family, there was a boy who resembled the Tyakamti features, who did not look like a son of a Brahmin. And they sent spies to investigate and found that it was the actual son of Tyakamti who had been brought up by this Brahmin family. So Sudangfa was ceremonially brought to Sarajevo and installed as the king. And he insisted that his foster parents, the Brahmin family, be also brought along with him. And that was the first time that Brahminism entered the royal palace. And
And
obviously, there was conflicts used to occur between
mm,
the Brahmin priests and the traditional, as you said, Bailung, Mohan, or any of the Barahi, any of the uh, Ahom priests, traditional Ahom priests. But ultimately, you'll discover if you read through the uh, entire Ahom dynasty's history, you will discover that the Brahmin priests, they became ascendant, especially during the time of a king called Hibohingha. Hibohingha, he was, very superstitious, and a Brahmin priest had warned him that his future is very bleak unless he abdicates the throne. So
mm,
Siva Singha, who was very superstitious, he gave up his throne and he uh, appointed his wife, the, the queen, whose name was Fuleswari. He appointed the queen as the king while he remained in the background. So the first time we had a female monarch in the entire Ahom dynasty. And this Fuleswari, she was totally, devoted to Brahmanism, to the Shakta religion. And what she did was, during her time, not only were traditional priests uh, removed from positions of power, traditional Ahom priests, but also she alienated what are known as the Vaishnav,
mm,
the practitioners of the Vaishnav religion. They were known as Moa Marias. Now, that was the beginning of the end for the Ahom dynasty because of this excessive devotion to the Hindu religion. Ultimately, the Moa Marias felt offended and they rose against the monarch, forcing the Ahom king to leave his capital and go to Lower Assam and seek the help of the British. Anyway, it's a very long and convoluted story, but
mm.
ultimately there was conflict between Brahminical priests and traditional priests, and ultimately the Brahminical priests they came out on top.
So Tamla Jayadhvaj Singha was the first to formally adopt Hinduism. So, what theological or strategic pressures prompted this dramatic change is my first part. And the second is, did the move towards Vaishnavism under his successors reflect a broader popular trend, or was it a top down result?
So, the Ahoms were very, careful to go along with the people.
Okay.
You see, there was no conflict between the subjects and the palace till the advent of Fuleswari Devi. She became morbidly uh, devoted or followed. She morbidly
Devoted, I have
followed,
been very religiously fanatic.
morbidly followed the Sakta religion and disowned all other religions. And but by that time, the influence of this Vaishnav saint Honkordev. Honkordev was prominent in Assamese society.
Mm.
So when the palace previously during the time of Sukafa, they were extremely tolerant, and they accepted Hinduism as their own and gave up their own religion. But in the case of Fulesari and Sivahinga time, what happened was the ruler disowned the kind of
Popular
religion
choice.
practiced by the subjects. Because by that time, Vaishnavism had taken strong root. But
Mm.
Fulesari being a Sakta, she started atrocities against these Vaishnav followers. And this is the clash which spelled the beginning of the end for the Ahom dynasty. The very moment the king, the monarch, refused to go the path traveled by his subjects, you find the decline of the Ahom dynasty started. Of course, there was another episode that was a traitor named Bodon Borfukan who invited the Burmese, the Myanmaris, to come and attack the Ahom kingdom. And that finally spelled the death knell because these Myanmaris, they not only attacked the Ahom kingdom, but they decimated the people, forcing the king of that time, Gorinath Hingo, to go to the lower Assam and appeal to the British for help. And as you well know, I think both of you, the British defeated the Burmese. They had a treaty with the Burmese known as the Yandabu Treaty. This was in 1826. Now, it's very ironical that in the Yandabu Treaty was struck between the Myanmaris or Burmese and the British. But the actual entity that ruled Assam at that time, the Ahoms, they were not signatory to that treaty, which shows how redundant the Ahom dynasty had become by then to the political progress of Assam.
Right. So you very beautifully, I think, you put this sentence that the height of glory is almost invariably followed by descent into nightmare, and that seven kings were enthroned and murdered within 11 years. So while we are talking about the decline of the Ahom Empire, uh, there are two, three factors that come to mind that were responsible for this. One, of course, is factionalism. The second is, as you've talked about in detail, the Vaishnav rebellion, the Maumorya rebellion. And the third is the Burmese invasions. So, among these three horsemen, so to say, of Ahom collapse, what do you think was the most decisive factor and why?
Decisive was definitely the internal strife. You see, destruction of any dynasty always starts from within. And the kind of solidarity and nationalism which was prevalent during, say, the days of Lasit Borfukan, Jayadhadra Singh, or the others, that solidarity had evaporated by the time a king like Gaurinath Singha ascended the throne. So it was internal division between the Ahoms themselves, abated by the hostility displayed by the Vaishnav followers, and finally the attack by the Myanmaris, which totally decimated the Ahom kingdom.
Some British chroniclers like Edward Gate, they paint the Ahoms as decadent by 1800. Does your reimagined lens challenge that trope? And if so, how?
I didn't get the thing.
Certain British chroniclers, like Edward Gate, he has painted the Ahoms as decadent by the 19th century. So, when you were writing the book, did this how did you challenge this trope?
Uh, well, I mean, Gate, he was he was the very first to have written in details about the Ahoms. Although his obviously was a biased kind of interpretation of history, even then, for sheer facts, you cannot beat Gate. But even then, the most important individual historian who brought this focus back into the Ahom dynasty was S.K. Bhuya. Now, S.K. Bhuya's book on the Ahom dynasty, it again, gave a new insight into this medieval dynasty. Now, I depended more on S.K. Bhuya's portrayal of the Ahoms than that of Gate. But then for dates and facts, I think Gate is extremely reliable.
Okay. So, just going on to some questions that pertain to the recent past or the recent times. Uh, as you said, I mean, the history of the Northeast and particularly of the Ahom Empire or the contributions to the freedom movement, they've largely been underplayed. And in most cases, not even underplayed, they've been straight away hidden from the Indian audience. So, do you think that the current stance of the government, whether it be talking more and more about Lachit Borphukan uh, instance, or taking the stance that we don't need to look east, we need to act east? Do you think that this is something that has a genuine integration, that has a genuine, impact as of today? Or do you see that as a symbol kind of an approach where the trying to, say that yes, this has happened, but it is all symbolic for, I don't know, like votes or whatever. Uh, as someone who has obviously worked for uh, raising awareness about Assam's marginalization, how do you see it?
Yes, again, you are absolutely right. I mean, but that is the fate of all places that are located in the periphery of such a vast country like India. You'll find the same kind of complaint being aired by, say, people from Tamil Nadu, that we have been ignored. You know, the further you go from the epicenter, the less interest people have on your past, your culture, your string. So I think it is this, for the first time, our new political entity, it is doing something, at least trying to attempting to bring some kind of focus on this dynasty. Prior to that, we had, before the new entity came, the latest entity, prior to that, we had decades of rule in Assam by other, what you call, political entities. They didn't bother to, project Assam in front of the country. They left it to people like me to write something about this land and its people. So yes, I mean, it is definitely, obviously, as you said, it is a populist kind of intention. After all, they are politicians and they know which side of the bread is buttered. But even then, the very fact that an attempt is being made, I think that is extremely laudable and praiseworthy. For
Hmm.
instance, we had our regime, you know, have a what you call celebration of Lasit Borphukan's life in Delhi. And
Hmm.
I think for the first time, the people of North India came to know that somebody called Lasit Borphukan actually existed, although in a remote corner of the country. So yes, any political, whatever may be the actual intentions, any political push towards giving acknowledgement to peripheral regions is always welcome.
So, sir, having covered almost all segments of Assam, like you've talked about rhinos in unicorns and tea in Jagaram, and now the Ahoms. What untouched slice of northeastern history is something you would want to get your hands on?
Well, I'm almost 80 years old now. Perhaps this is, I allow my pen to go a bit dry. But you'll be happy to know that one of my novels, is being brought out, hopefully by early next year, by the same publisher who published the Ahoms, HarperCollins. That is a novel, and plus I do some, some political writing also. In the sense, I write the daily editorials for our premier English newspaper. Otherwise, I think, and obviously, I would like my once my novel, the editing process is going on. Once it is out, then perhaps I'll think about what my next subject would be. So there are lots of aspects which you can, think. Only problem are the publishers. For instance, this book called Saint Savior Soul Society, it
Hmm.
focuses on a very important figure in the development of Assamese society. But no mainstream national level publisher wanted to touch this subject, saying that, oh, he's just simply a religious propagator. And so they didn't accept the manuscript. The same publishers who had published my other books, they didn't accept a book of that type. And I had to get it published by a local publisher. So even now there are lots of roadblocks,
Hmm.
but hopefully with people like you around, things will change for the better in the course of time.
So my last question, and one that holds a lot of importance today, as we said that the Ahom represent a people uh, that face so many difficulties from outside as well. But the most important factor that perhaps led to their decline was the internal factor that they faced in terms of factionalism, in terms of rebellion. So, in today's India, in the 21st century India, what can we learn from the Ahoms? And to all the young viewers watching our channel right now, watching this video right now, what would uh, what would your message to them be about this dynasty and about the Northeast in general, about which their textbooks are very hesitant to teach them about?
No, I mean, see, the people who publish books, they also have a commercial motive behind what they
Definitely.
publish. Now, not everyone is as generous as you to devote an hour and a half to a dynasty that used to be in the northeast region in Assam. But you will discover that most mainstream publishers, they don't think there is any kind of commercial benefit to be had with publishing books dealing with this region. That's a very unpalatable truth. And I have, in the last 6 decades, I have found this to be a bitter reality. That's, something, say, related to this region is they don't think that they will not get enough, what you call profit out of it. I'll give you one example. There's one Delhi publisher. He, they have a series called Charitavali series, which features important names from different parts of the thing, small biographies on those people. So they requested me to write the biography of one of our another icon, Bhupen Hazarika. You must have heard his name. He's a very famous singer
Mm.
here. And also a thing, the saint I was telling you about, Honkordev. On him, they commissioned 2 books, one on Honkordev and one on Bhupen Hazarika. So after I submitted the manuscript and the photographs, I requested them that please publish the book on Honkordev first, because he is more important to Assamese society than Bhupen Hazarika. You can take up Bhupen Hazarika's book later. This publisher replied to me that, sorry, we will publish Bhupen Hazarika first because he is commercially more viable. Do you get the point I am making? So unless you get national level publishers to publish books on the Northeast, I mean, it's very difficult to get them interested in publishing books because they do not think that there will be sufficient
Assimilation.
commercial motivation for them to do so. But now, again, as I said, things are changing. And we have had a small snippet of our history in the NCRT syllabus. And perhaps in the future, there will be a rethink on the part of the national level publishers also.
So, with that, we come to the end of this conversation. Both me and Aditya, we want to thank you from the bottom of our
So
hearts
much.
No, no,
for.
I should be the one thanking you. I have had quite a few interactions with national level, organizations like yours, not only Ahom, but in other aspects also. Of course, I have never had a problem like this before when my face didn't come into the screen. The last I had, I think, was with the argumentative Indian. But there
Right.
it was all hunky-dory. But today I think there's some glitch. But anyway, it was lovely talking to both of you and also to
Yes,
your husband. Thank you so much for, trying to bring the Ahom dynasty into focus.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for writing this book because you have transcended dry, blatant facts and you've made it into this vibrant saga of curiosity and storytelling. And through that, this this forgotten part of history has actually, entrenched
Found its
into,
voice.
yes, and reach the greater number of people, like both of us included. So we're very thankful to you for that, and we hope to have you again on our channel.
uh, in a different mode, I hope.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, both of
Thank you
you.
Thank
so
you,
much,
sir.
sir.